Just a couple of things. So if this is your first time, a bit about us. We're the Frontend Developers South Africa non-profit organization. It was kind of came about via what was called Cape Town Frontend Developers that was started in 2012. We've been running meetups for 8 years now, workshops and so on. We formed a non-profit to extend our reach and the things that we're going to do. One thing we have planned is a conference at some point. It was going to be this year, but the world went insane, so that was scrapped. We'll look at hosting that next year. So we've been running lots of meetups actually, because it's a little bit easier to do it online, because for various reasons. So we've been running, I think, maybe even 2 a month, Scott, if I'm right. This is the second one. We had one last week, and now we have one this week as well. So that's been great, and we've been getting lots of speakers. Speaking of which, we're always looking for people who'd like to give us a talk on something related to front end or design and UI design. So if that's what you'd like to do, you can get hold of myself or Skulk or Shaylin. We hang out on ZA Tech Slack mostly, but you can also find us. We have a Front-End Developer South Africa page on LinkedIn. And of course, we also have the meetup presence, and you can get hold of us via those means. And as I say, we're always looking for people who would like to do some talks. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping stuff. So we generally ask that you mute yourself unless you're the speaker. And please post questions in the chat. So if you open the chat window, and we'll collect all those questions in the chat, and then we'll pose them at the end when we have a discussion. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker today is Zhang. I'm reading here the bio that you sent us, and he's here all the way from San Francisco. So welcome, very nice to have you. So Yang sent us a bio. He's had an early career in distributed databases and machine learning, but he developed a love for front end, and he's also gone from big companies to startups. And his time with React and JavaScript has seen him build complex spreadsheet software, as well as massive multiplayer real-time browser games. And he's now building Plasmic full-time, which is a React UI builder, and the subject of the talk for this evening. So without further ado, over to you, Yang. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Justin, for having me, and also thanks everyone for joining. So I'll share my screen with some slides. I just have a few simple slides. Okay, hopefully that is coming through. All right, so I'm basically, so I'm Yang. I'm here to talk about this project called Plasmic, and I'm excited to be here and share a little bit about it, just because it's something that started a while back for me as a passion project, and something I hope can be useful to all React developers, but also just interesting to learn about as a React project in and of itself, since it's definitely been a source of learnings, many learnings. So I'm going to go through my slides here. So I'll start with what is Plasmic. It's basically a visual builder for React, and want to solve 2 different problems with it. So this is the first problem where I'm actually curious to, I'm always curious to poll the audience first, just to see how many of you work with a designer. Maybe, I'm not sure if there's a better way to do this in Zoom, but maybe just mention in chat if you do. I'm just curious.
Everyone can do a thumbs up reaction.
Ah, yeah.
If the answer is yes.
Cool. All right, so quite a few people. Let's see. I personally, I've had the chance to work with designers maybe like less than a majority of the time, but it's whenever I do, it's always a lot of fun. I always learn a lot. But at least from our experience on product teams, collaboration with designers can be complex because designers, they create these high fidelity vector drawings essentially that engineers have to recreate from scratch, by hand using code. And inevitably, a ton of things get in this translation because it turns out that we as developers really suck at this rote task in general, and or it can just be hard to translate because designs are freeform drawings. So this leads to a lot of back and forth with designers, and ultimately you have these two sources of truth on product teams that by most teams' admission are never truly in sync. So we wanted to streamline that collaboration and translation process first of all. This is the second reason for working on this, which is that basically just wanted a better, more selfishly, a better and rethought development experience for those of us working on building front ends. And this is so we can build a lot faster, but at the same time, hopefully eliminate entire classes of visual bugs and QA and related tooling that come with that. So, UI builders are nothing new. They're actually widely used and have generated perfectly fine code that ships in all sorts of major apps for a long time, especially though on other platforms, on iOS and Android and Windows, where there's kind of this clear, company owning the platform that made this tool available. And so we wanted to bring some of that to the web as well. So Plasmic is basically a visual builder for React. What it does is it lets developers, that's kind of our main focus right now, but we're also trying to keep it accessible to designers as well. But letting developers or designers craft these complex presentational components that you can then import into your real world, messy React code base. And so, yeah, the idea is to let you move a lot faster and also fix designer developer collaboration. Yeah, so that is a lot of words just setting the stage for what Plasmic is and why I work on it. Let's see. By the way, as I'm doing this talk, please feel free to interrupt me with questions at any time. I probably won't be able to keep a super close eye on the chat box here, especially for this next part. I'm going to be jumping into a demo, so just feel free to interrupt me on anyone's behalf as well. Thank you. All right, so I'll show kind of first just this demo to show what Plasmic is, how it works, and then for the next part after that, I'm going to dive into more, peeling back the curtains a little bit and understanding how something like Plasmic works. So it's basically this browser-based tool, and I actually really encourage you guys to as I'm going through this. Besides just like understanding what Plasmic is, also kind of think about like how would you build something like Plasmic, if you were to purchase from. So I'm gonna start in this demo just creating a new project, and for this thing I'll just create to-do MVC, a very small subset of to-do MVC actually, in case you're not familiar or haven't seen it in a while. This is just, everyone's favorite sort of reference app. I won't build the whole thing. I'll just build a subset of it. But basically, and actually in Plasmic, there's a few different ways to get started. But, one way is to start with this sort of Figma import plugin. I'll talk about it later. But for this demo, I'll start from scratch. All right, so basically, this is the canvas that you get to start with, and the idea is that I can just start adding elements to the screen and start basically freeform drawing onto this canvas. I'm just styling this title right now, picking kind of the right shade of red that I want. I'll roughly position it absolutely speaking in the middle. And right below it, I'll draw a box for the actual task itself, my first task. It's just this thin card Actually, I'm going to set the background of the whole page to be this off-white warm gray, and I'll set this background to be white. And then inside of this, I'll draw a box for my actual checkbox for the task. And maybe I'll set it to be fully rounded because it's a circular checkbox. And I'll remove the background and add a light border. Maybe a little lighter. Okay, cool. So that is my my card, and then right next to that, I'll add some text for the actual task itself. So like buy some milk. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's better. And I'll set its color to be just a little bit lighter. Maybe I'll save this as a reusable color token called text color. So that's kind of the flow that Plasmic tries to enable, is for you to actually even start out with just very rough freeform drawings of your UI, just to get ideas down on paper, but then from there refine it into something real. So you start scratch, refine into something that has robust layout, it's for production, etc. So I drew this this task, but I actually want a bunch of these things on screen. What I can do is I'm going to right click this and basically create a component out of it called task. And now I can copy this thing a bunch of times to have multiple instances of this task. And I've been arranging them roughly vertically, but if I actually want to have them truly arranged in this vertical stack, I can press V and lasso them together into one real stack. And this is kind of like it's powered by Flexbox, but the controls that Plasmic gives you tries to really simplify a lot of what you can do in terms of CSS layout. So this is just it's a streamlined thing to make things more intuitive, because CSS layout can be tricky. So what I will do is first I'll clear out the background, but I'm gonna align everything to the top, everything to the left. I'm also gonna double click an edge to auto size the content vertically, and I'll do the same on the horizontal axis. These are some simpler features. I'll show some more interesting ones in a little bit, but I'll call this whole element my task list. This is just to keep my elements organized, but also to help me with code generation later. So let's see. This list of tasks is it's great, but I it's a little boring because they all say the same thing. So what I want is for the text to actually be different, right? In fact, I want it to be variable. So what I can do is I can double click this component to start editing it. And when I edit this component, I'm any changes I make are reflected to all the instances of it. But for now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this text and convert it to what's called a slot. And what these slots do is they essentially let you poke a hole in the component, so that from outside of the component, from any one of these instances, I can customize the content. So for instance, I can call this make to do app or show demo. But you can fill it with any number of elements that you want, besides just changing the text. Now I have my tasks. The last thing I'll do is I'll design them in their different states. So this is common for React components, designing them in their different states. So what I'll do is I'll first pop this out into its own artboard on the right, and this is just so I can work on it in isolation. If you're familiar with the React Storybook, it's the same general philosophy of letting you focus on one thing at a time. And the way that things like states are modeled in Plasmic is there's this concept called variance. It's a general unifying concept, and I'll just show how it works by I'll create a new group of variants called states. And maybe I want to design what this thing looks like when it's marked completed, when it's being edited, when it's marked high priority, etc. So there can be a bunch of different states. I'm just enumerating some of them right here. But for this demo, I'll just design out the completed state. And for that, I want there to be a check mark in that checkbox. So for that to happen, I actually like the look of this check mark from the reference app here. So I'm going to screen grab it real quick. Just whoops. Like so. And then down here, I'll paste it. I'm actually gonna adjust it a little bit with this pixel grid, and then I'll zoom back out. So this is, I just kind of manually centered it, but you can also use automatic layout. Doesn't really matter in this case. So I have this, completed version of the task, and I can switch between the base appearance and the completed appearance just to show you the difference. This is actually not a copy of the component, but just a set of overrides or deltas on top of the base appearance that record like what is the difference. In this case, just the appearance of the mark.
Now again.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I missed if there was a question there.
I think that was just background noise.
Just noise. Okay. All right. No worries. So actually, to better show you what's going on, I'll take this whole artboard and I'll duplicate it. So I have two views of this task side by side. You can create as many as you want, and I'll have the bottom one reflect the base appearance and the top one reflect the completed appearance. And so if I make changes to the base appearance, just to show you that they're not hard copies of each other. If I make changes to the base appearance, they do propagate to the completed appearance. But if I'm recording changes specifically to the completed appearance, then those are only specific, are only going to the completed appearance, like this check mark. Another change maybe I'll make is for the text to be strikeout and a lighter text color. So I'm just directly manipulating these things as I'm editing this variant.
Sorry, yeah.
So now, oh yes, please.
Yes, there's one question about whether Plasmic includes element libraries. For example, images, icons, and so forth. So this is from Michael. So I assume the implication here would be like, for example, material design and so forth.
Right. Yeah. So so you can create your own basically sets of components. And one thing that is actually fairly close right now is cross-project imports. That's something we've been working on, and so that'll let you basically share your work across different projects if you're working on those kind of projects. But cool. So let's see. The thing about variants is that you can dynamically combine any number of them as a set. So for instance, let's say I also wanted to add a hover state to this task where whenever I hover over any part of it, I want this circle to become darker. So I'm gonna basically add another variant for my hover state, which actually has some special support from Plasmic just because it's pseudo slasher and whatnot. Now at the I'm selected in this circle, and I'm just going to set the color to be darker. So that's what happens on hover. And I can actually try this out by going to preview mode and actually interacting with this thing. Okay, so that's close to what I want, but I noticed that I also want there to be a hand pointer on that circle. So I'll just change that to pointer. And now, okay, that's better. So this is kind of an iteration that Plasmic tries to enable, just fast feedback. So I'm going to go back to my main screen and set one of these to be completed. So the variants come with the component wherever it goes. I can also preview this whole thing and see the interactions coming with it. That is pretty much it for creating this simple app. Maybe the last thing I'll do is just tighten up the layout because everything's still kind of free floating here. So I'll set this to be a column layout and center everything. And yeah, I think that is pretty much it. I'll add some padding to the top and bottom, and let's see. I'll call this whole thing my to-do app. So I turn that into a component, this whole screen into a component as well. So I have two components in this project now, my task component and my to-do app component. Okay, cool. So hopefully that what just happened made sense. And the next part, I'm actually going to turn this, import this into code, which is the interesting bit. So for that, basically one quick way to get started is through this code sandbox integration. And the idea there is that you can just quickly spin up a sandbox with your components that you've crafted, imported already, and then you can just see things render on the screen as this pixel perfect mirror of what you created. Now, besides that, I think the more interesting case for us is generating this code into your, for consumption in your own code base locally. So so there's this CLI that Plasmic provides, which I already have installed, so I'm going to skip that step. The next step is I'm going to run Plasmic init, and this is just a command you run the first time you get started using Plasmic on any sort of code base. So I'm running it here. So this code base is actually just a blank create React app. I'll show you it running. So this is what a blank create React app looks like. Now the next command I'll run is this Plasmic sync command, which is going to pull down the actual components from this particular project, both the task and the to-do app component. So I should see them show up here. And now if I pull up my code editor, so I'll have my code on the left and the running app on the right. And I'm going to change all this boilerplate here from the default React project to be to just render things on the screen. I'm going to render that to-do app like so. And hit save, and hopefully it'll pick that up. Yes, great. So now I have this thing running in my own React app. Now, of course, this is just a static mock. So from here, I actually want to wire it up into real stuff. My own tasks and whatnot. This is what the to-do app code looks like. It's actually really simple. There's a lot of comments, but if I delete all the comments, then you can see it's just actually a few lines, a one-line function component, and the it's just a simple wrapper, thin wrapper around the Plasmic to-do app. So the way this works is Plasmic to-do app is this dumb presentational component that handles all the rendering of stuff on the screen, and it's got a flexible interface so that you can customize, exactly what props go to which elements, etc. And this to-do app component around it is just a skeleton starter that is generated for you, so you can, just do what you want with this file. It's owned by you. So, for instance, I can add my state and behavior and business logic here. You can do whatever you want. You don't even have to render the Plasmic to-do app here. So maybe I want to get my own tasks on the screen for now. So I'm going to assume they live in some kind of React state like this. And maybe my tasks are simple JS objects with a name property. And I actually have a few of them. And I'm going to now wire this up by saying the task list, remember that element we named earlier, I want its contents to be entirely just my own set of tasks. And to render that list, I'm going to use the other component that we synced down, the task component, to do so. And like that, I should have my own tasks showing up. And from here, you can keep going and add on-click handlers, etc., to these elements. So it's really designed to be have this kind of affordance of just wiring things up. And same thing with the task. I can go into that and start editing that as well. That is how the code import works. Now, this is not just a one-time import. You can actually go back into the tool and continue refining the design. So it's not like a one-time eject. To show you that in action, I'm going to turn on watch mode so I can live stream edits from the design tool to this code base. Now I'll have my code running on the right. Sorry, I think sometimes I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but sometimes my create React app server, dev server, gets wedged in this cache state whenever I hit save. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. So I'm going to have my running app on the right and my well, I don't have a ton of real estate, but I guess I can zoom out. My studio on the left. And just to show you kind of what's going on roughly, I'm going to start making some violent changes to the layout of this thing. So I'll turn this vertical list into a set of tiles for the tasks. And to do that, I'm going to start by making this look a little boxier. I'll turn it into real layout where I have some padding and everything's top aligned. I'm going to actually take this this checkbox and pop it out of its place so that it's free floating, and I'll drag it down to the bottom right, like so. And actually, I'll pin it to the right and to the bottom. Now, that is the new look of my task. I still have them in this vertical list, which is not great. So I'm going to set everything to be a row layout. Now everything is spilling off the edge of the screen, but I can turn on basically this wrapping to have things wrap around and be centered. So that is better, but I notice it's hard for me to tell apart the different tasks. So I'm going to add some gap in the vertical direction and the horizontal direction as well. So anyway, that is just the set of changes. So you can see some of the more interesting layout features that we have in Plasmic. And as I was making these changes, changes were actually streaming into the React App server. So that's the kind of workflow that this really tries to enable for you. Great. I think that was it for the actual demo part. I'll switch back to my slides. All right. So now I'll talk about kind of some of the challenges that went into building the thing. There's a bunch of technical challenges. So one big one for us is the state management infrastructure. I'll start with just covering quickly the architecture of Plasmic itself. It's a React TypeScript application, this whole studio, and there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of very deep state that's being managed client side. The artboards here, actually each of these is an iframe that is housing itself a React TypeScript application as well. So these applications are code bases that are being directly manipulated by this this studio tool on the fly as you're making these changes. So that's kind of how the structure works. So there's a total of 4 React applications we're looking at on screen at this time. The studio itself and each of these iframes. Let's see. So in order to make all this work and stay snappy, and by which I mean, you have these kind of drag operations that are, things that you generally want to be pretty smooth. We worry about performance a lot, and by that I mean latency. Like, you typically, if you're shooting for 60 FPS, drag operation, then you have a budget of like 16 milliseconds, which is, if you want to make sure you're not busting that budget all the time, then you have to make sure you're doing the minimum amount of work necessary in response to state updates, so that you're doing basically fine-grained updates to your re-rendering tree. And so that's one aspect of this, but the other aspect of this is scalability as well. So latency and scalability together is hard because I currently only have these 3 tasks on the screen, or these 3 artboards on the screen. But if I have 100 of these or something like that, then how do you keep things responsive in that state as well? So for instance, one thing that's simple to describe, but a bunch of work to do, is to break up your updates, your re-renders into as many small incremental bite-sized chunks as possible. So that way you can kind of have the luxury of prioritizing that queue of work as you see fit. For instance, I'll show you actually, as you can see a little bit, watch the left, watch the left-hand side and the top artboards as I'm dragging around this check box. So I don't know actually if that's coming through clearly on the video feed, but there is kind of a lag, a delay between as I'm dragging this thing around and when these things are updated. And that's because there's, we are breaking up that work. We're not just, synchronously calling update on all the artboards whenever you are updating the state. It's actually just kind of lazily propagating those changes to the other artboards. And so, we prioritize this one that you're manipulating the highest. The ones around you are stepped down, and the ones off screen are stepped down from that. So that's kind of work that's happening here. Another technical challenge is around a feature I didn't really show here so far, which is the ability to import your own code components. So if you have your own components, or if you're using something like Material UI, it can be useful to compose new UIs out of those existing bases. So for that, basically, there's this dynamic module loading infrastructure that has to happen, because we're basically injecting at runtime this arbitrary third-party code into your canvas and into these artboards. And in order for that to happen in a secure and isolated way, you actually this is one area where architecturally, being in iframes really helps, is that it makes certain compartmentalization easier. And so, but there's also, just the work of, if you are using React scripts, or you have your own sort of Webpack config for generating and bundling and processing all your source code, how do we piggyback on top of that as much as possible, and just like in a lightweight way, kind of also generate the side artifact, which is basically what you can put into Plasmic. So you're not, uploading your raw source code to us, but you can just like share the generated bundles. And so that's kind of the module loading infrastructure. And then now you have your, your material UI button, or whatever component on screen, and you can insert it into the canvas. But how do you work with it? How do you edit it, manipulate it? And that's where the code introspection part comes in. Basically, there's this toolchain, this client that can crawl your code base and surface all the components it finds in it, and kind of reflect out the kind of input and props that you take. And this can be a little nuanced because, a bunch of controls you might want to show up as the knobs in the right sidebar, but maybe there's certain props, actually, like children props and function as child props, that you actually want to directly manipulate on the canvas by drag and dropping elements, etc. So that's kind of what code introspection is about. There's some product challenges. So I mentioned briefly just making layout more intuitive. CSS layout is one of these things that is can be pretty tricky, and distilling that into a small set of intuitive controls is, I think, a really important, just long-running project. Like for instance, if you have two text divs that you want to sit horizontally side by side, this is just a recent example, and you want them to stretch to fill the available space given to them horizontally. You might try setting flex to 1 on these things, but you may or may not be surprised at the result. And so, there's always an explanation. Like in this case, flex row is multiplying the flex spaces. And so whenever you have things side by side like that in flex direction row, that defaults to the width. The basis defaults to the width. And the width defaults to auto, which in this case means the max content size. So you basically effectively have these two text divs growing at different speeds depending on the text that's currently in them at the given time, which is, just almost never what I want. And I mean, that's actually a really simple example. There's a lot of much more hard to understand examples that I still can't wrap my head around, in terms of like, how height percentages work, when they do and don't respect the parent, there's like the used value and the specified value of the height on the parent, and some things affect the specified value, some things don't. And anyway, there's just like a lot of ways to cut yourself with CSS, and also like 10 different ways to go about anything. Like, why not just slap width 50% on those two text divs and call it a day? Well, there's like different trade-offs, right? So anyway, that is kind of making layout intuitive. I don't think we're done here. I think there's a lot more to be done, actually. And another product challenge is, I mentioned at the beginning just the ability to kind of import designs from existing design tools. So for instance, this is our Figma plugin for actually, translating Figma's document representation into web standards and the DOM and whatnot. So, Figma is one of these many design tools that comes from a graphic design background. So what that means is, it deals with layers and layer masks and blend modes on layers, and you have inner and outer shadows in CSS, but you have centered borders in Figma, etc. So translating a lot of that into web standards is just this very grungy thing that this plugin tries to automate as much as possible. And so there's a lot of work that basically had to go into mapping these concepts across these two different very different domains. But I think the most interesting challenge that I can talk about is really this code integration piece. So how do you make, if you think about what's natural for visual direct manipulation and code, we want to marry the best of both worlds and make it really natural and flexible for you to work with what you create in the studio. So this is, this flexibility is important for kind of necessary practical reasons. Like I just need to wire this up to my own set of tasks or my own event handlers, right? That's one level. But there's also kind of the more aesthetic reasons as well. Like I want to control what my component interface looks like. Sure, I can get it done with any component interface, but I want to control that. What I mean by that is, this task component here, as an example, this thing by default, this is the task. It takes that children, it takes the state props where I can, say that I want this thing rendered as a completed task, etc. But instead of this fully controlled state like this, or fully controlled interface like this, maybe I want this thing to not take any of these props. I want it to just take one single high-level task prop, and it internally decides how it wants to render its children, etc. So that's what I mean by aesthetics. This actually led us to two very different schemes. The first is this presentational library scheme, which I've already shown you, where we generate these dumb presentational components that you can just like stick into your own code and do what you will with. And this gets regenerated and blown away whenever you are updating your designs from the code, from the upstream project. So that's pretty simple to kind of understand, like, the line between, what you manage and what Plasmic manages. The polar opposite of that, actually, philosophically speaking, is this direct edit scheme, where the idea here is to give you transparent white box access to the plain JSX tree that you can directly manipulate. And, it's actually fun to show, but I'm going to edit my Plasmic JSON so that I am moving over from the black box scheme to the direct edit scheme, like so. And now I'll regenerate the code here, just forcefully. And if I refresh, great. So this is the direct edit scheme. So you actually have direct access and can directly see and manipulate this JSX tree. Still, it tries to hide a lot of the cruft around like the class names and stuff from you, so that you're not like, you don't have to stare at that all the time. But you can, from here, start actually just directly editing this code. So for instance, I want to delete those tasks and this whole thing in my own set of loops and whatnot. And maybe I also want to add an on-click handler to this title here. And maybe in addition to that, I also want to, maybe I'm using MobX and I want to wrap some elements in this observer. Whoops, like so. I don't know, maybe I want to add some random div for testing purposes down here. And yeah, so you can just make a bunch of changes like this to the source code. And basically what happens is I'm going to turn on Plasmic Watch. So I'm going to have my code on the right and my studio on the left. And as I'm, let's say I want to make some more changes to the design, and I'm going to, I don't know, I don't feel super creative, but I'm going to change this to the more enthusiastic title, and maybe I'll add a box in between the title and the body, and I'll delete some of these tasks, etc. So you can see these changes actually get streamed and inlined, merged in with your own existing changes. And the way this works basically is it's rebasing your developer edits on top of the latest presentational code, so that it's similar to a Git line-based rebase, if you're familiar with that. But because we have awareness of JSX syntax, we can do something a lot smarter and reduce conflicts. And we can do that because we have ancestral information about the history of this project. And so you have the common ancestor in the left and the right from the code edits and the design edits. And so you can do that three-way diff. That's kind of like the standard algorithm for this. So yeah, let's see. That is, oops. that is the code integration piece. So, you know, I think both schemes are actually equally expressive for the most part, and it just kind of comes down to your preference on which style you like to work with. But I think so far, you know, Presentational library has been the predominant one for a lot of users. I think the last thing I want to talk about is just the impact on our own workflow, at least. So the first is that by starting with the design and leading with that, it kind of forces you to think about what is the end goal in terms of the product experience that you're shooting for, and you know, helps you kind of take a top-down approach to building this out, and all the code that you write is then in service directly of that end goal. So it's nice from that regard. You know, bottom-up approaches definitely have their place, especially in projects with high technical risk. But for a lot of projects, it can also just be a more bumbling kind of approach. I think the second impact on our workflow is, you know, I think this is probably the most important one, which is that if you do work with, you know, kind of a technical designer and somebody who can wield a tool like this, then there's something really magical about just, you know, running Plasmic Sync, and the next time you run Plasmic Sync, a nicer version of your landing page appears in your code base, or what have you. That was just, you know, what we were recently working on. Yeah, so I think this is probably actually the most important for us to continue exploring. The third one is really, this does help us sidestep some classes of you know, visual regression tests that we used to have, and also manual QAing that we did of the design versus the implementation to make sure things lined up. You know, because you already are declaratively modeling exactly what you want the end result to look like in the studio. And I think this is the most fun part, which is just, you know, we actually launched, or we just publicly announced this 2 weeks ago. And so it's been a lot of fun actually getting, you know, real users and folks creating things with this. And there's, I think this is probably the most out there thing that we definitely didn't anticipate, but an actual control panel for LiDAR sensors on autonomous vehicles, but also just you know, a bunch of different SaaS apps and web apps. I mean, there's a much longer list at this point just because a lot more users. But of course, Plasmic itself. Oh, I didn't show actually. I can show our own sort of Plasmic Kit project, and the way that works is, well, I'll just show a few components that we create. But you know, there's this activity feed, which is actually not shipped in the product yet. The settings page is just where you go to create your access tokens, your API tokens, our many different forms of buttons. So buttons are usually great stress tests for variants and whatnot. There's a text box and toggles and other primitive things. The share dialog, oh yes. So the share dialog is just this thing right here. Our code sandbox dialog, which is, let's see, this thing right here. Let's see, our drop downs, our left pane, all the left pane here. So there's a lot of different sections that are just, you know, just need to be created. And let's see, our many icons, because we have a lot of icons, and the dashboard itself, which is kind of this page that I started on, is designed here as well. So anyway, that's kind of a quick tour. I think that is it. Thank you so much for listening, and you know, I'd love to take questions. If you are interested in playing with this, please go ahead and sign up, and welcome your feedback. If you mention this meetup, I'll just get you your invite right after this, because there is a wait list of folks right now, and we'll be sharing our progress publicly. So feel free to kind of follow us on that on Twitter. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That was really fascinating. Yeah, any questions? Michael says it's very cool and he'll definitely give it a whirl. And Jonathan says, for sure. And Leandri says it's super impressive. So, any questions? I'm sure there are some.
I have loads.
Skullcast. I know Skullcast.
Okay, great.
No, it's interesting because I actually teach UI design at a college in my area, and we actually looked a bit at Webflow today. So this is very relevant. So I think my first question would be how do you deal with responsiveness, especially like responsive web design? That tends to kind of usually be the hard part when it comes to these type of tools.
Yeah, great question. So, for responsive design, actually, I can go back into this to-do app just to use that as an example. Right now, okay, so I have this to-do app, and it's just kind of mobile. I think this is a mobile screen. What is this? 450? Yeah, I guess it's kind of a large mobile screen. I can basically get rid of these. I can make this laid out a certain way on desktop as well. So I can actually just clone this this whole artboard here, like so, and have it sit side by side. So I'm just going off road here just to show you what is going on. But I basically have a desktop view and a kind of this phone-ish view side by side. And if I make changes, it's still the same component, so changes are reflected in both. But let's say that I wanted to have a mobile-first design. So my base appearance is my mobile screen, and on top of that, customizations are for the desktop variant. So it's still actually using the same general concept of variants to model this. But there's actually a special type that has built-in support for media queries, which is this screen type of variant. And what I can do is I can create a new screen variant for instance, let's go desktop. And that kicks in whenever I'm over 500 pixels. And maybe for the desktop, I want the font to, I don't know, that's a great example, but maybe I want it to be even bigger than already is, which is huge. I don't know, I want the layout of this whole thing to be, fully elastic, like maybe it's actually, I'm gonna have it stretch to fill the available space, but with some padding, with some margins, I guess, around the sides, or no, actually, I don't think that's, maybe actually, yeah, I'll just add some padding around the sides here. I mean, can't really see the edges here, but if I'm resizing this thing, you can see this one's growing at whatever speed I want. Maybe another thing is I want there to be an extra like text here saying like I'll add some text inside. Whoops, sorry about that. I meant to add text, not Dropbox. I'll add some text here saying welcome to the desktop version. And all this is specific to the desktop version and not showing up in the mobile version. So you can make a bunch of these changes. It's just using the same concept of variants, really.
That's interesting because yeah, that's something that I guess React, like having a underlying React kind of engine allow, because
yeah.
with Webflow you kind of need to like manually like almost want to say understand the binding between kind of the box model and media queries and those type of things. But like, yeah, I can see how it's actually a lot easier with React because you're essentially just determining, you're just treating like different breakpoints as different states. That's very interesting. And is that under the hood? Is that handled by kind of CSS media queries, or is it kind of a JavaScript event listener? Okay.
It is handled by media queries, and there's actually a fallback to to what you call it, actually using it's still using media queries, but programmatically through hooks. So I mean, all this is encapsulated from you, but basically you can you know, if I actually wanted to make some like content changes or change the props on elements, like you can't do that through pure CSS. You have to have your re-renders happen.
Okay. Okay, cool. And is this very similar insofar that because like I think one thing that really bugs me about Figma is you can do kind of that prototyping and code exporting, but it just absolute positions everything.
Right.
And so, but from what I'm seeing here, it looks like, you know, like you kind of have built in like tubing for like Flexbox and those type of things.
That's right. Yeah. So one big goal was to, I mean, you can basically build real, you know, things in their full complexity in this. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And just to clarify, we're, you know, Plasmic is not trying to be a replacement for Figma or anything. So for instance, we're probably not introducing a vector drawing tool or like a pen tool into this. You know, Figma is great for all your vector art, etc. But this is more about, you know, actually bringing your designs to production.
I see we have another question here. Someone's mentioning they're trying to sign up, but they get redirected to the survey.
Yeah, so I haven't admitted anyone yet, so I'll do that right after this.
Okay, cool. Okay, I see. Okay, sure. Okay, then I'm gonna just cram in another quick one. So hopefully giving some opportunity for others to ask some questions as well. So how do you, so you mentioned you're not directly trying to compete with Figma. How do you see Plasmic being positioned in terms of tooling like Webflow and so forth?
Yeah, also, you know, I think the big difference is that Webflow is more focused on, you know, website builders and static websites, and you know, they service especially these like marketing teams. But our audience is quite different. Ours is developers and development teams. So this is more of a tool for, you know, real like you have a real React code base, and, you know, we're not trying to be an end-to-end app builder or anything like that. You know, we like code, we like types, and, you know, all this stuff that makes complexity manageable and expressing. So we're not trying to like reinvent programming or anything like that. But
I see Michael also asks, how does Plasmic compare to UXPin? He asks, is that a relevant question?
Yeah, it's relevant. I think UXPin is also, you know, like Figma and Sketch, primarily a design tool for designers, and less for developers or production. You know, it's in the class of tools that are for like design and prototyping, essentially.
Okay. I think then from my side as well is, so one thing that I've kind of discovered is so I think the Webflow team specifically, what they have in mind is that you start from scratch and you kind of work your way up to like a finished product that you're publishing from the dashboard. But what I've seen quite a bit is a lot of teams kind of use something like Webflow somewhere in between kind of the liminal spaces in their workflow. So maybe to do prototyping, or maybe to do wireframing with kind of a bit of a more like allowing them to be a bit more mindful in terms of how that wireframe is going to transition between kind of different viewports and so forth. Do you see Plasmic as a tool primarily for like kind of an all-encompassing like UI like management tool, or like do you foresee that it might be used kind of like for more specific purposes, like as part of a bigger like workflow?
Yeah, good question. So I mean, right now, Plasmic is really focused on just that whole flow from a visual medium to the code. So basically, taking things into production is kind of where this sits. So it's it's definitely like a little bit just hard to directly compare with something like Webflow, which is more of, they host your website and all this stuff, and it's not about integrating into your CI/CD or like your real code base or anything like that. Yeah, I guess the place in the workflow is really it's a development tool. So sitting in front of the usual sort of release process or code merge process, but sitting behind maybe if you already have designers doing exploratory design in a tool like Figma. That's kind of one of the big reasons why we work on the Figma plugin, is so that it's clear we're not trying to displace exploratory design tools. We're trying to actually interop with them really well. So.
Any questions from anyone else?
Yes, from me. So I have a question about the CSS, and how is that ultimately output? Are you using like CSS in JS or CSS modules? Can I set global CSS attributes and variables and things like that in Plasmic, or is it strictly on a component basis?
So the answer to the first question is the CSS output is we have to keep it to plain CSS, just because like any sort of library that you pull in on NPM, for instance, ultimately that is the standard consumed form of the CSS. And so rather than us requiring you use a certain high-level framework, we have to target the lowest common denominator.
Sure.
But there is actually the ability to output the styles in other formats as well. If you want to, for instance, reuse your color tokens that you've defined in Plasmic, we actually output these. I don't know if you're familiar. Salesforce Theo files. Theo is one of these design token managers.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with this. Yes.
Yeah, there's also the AWS style dictionary, for instance.
Yeah.
They basically, so yeah, we output these formats, and so that if you want to, consume this as from your SAS files or your, Xcode files or whatever, then you can do that.
Okay, great.
And I think the second question was, can you manage basically style abstractions in Plasmic? And so yeah, you can. One simple example of this is like, color token. So I have this one color token here, but I can define another one for like the title color or something like that. And I mean, color tokens and style tokens are basically simple primitive values that you can attach to things. There will also be style tokens for spacing, etc. But there's also, besides style tokens, there's mixins as well. So mixins are basically entire bundles of styles that you can reuse. What I can do is, for instance, all this text style, I can extract into a new mixin called my title style. And so now it's tagged with title. Let's say down below, I'm going to add some other text here, and I'm going to apply that title mixin to it. So it applies the same style basically to that mixin. It's kind of reflowing here.
Great.
But if I want to make changes to this, then it'll affect both. So let's see that. Hopefully that.
Yeah, great.
Answers.
I have another CSS related question. Are you using, obviously you're using Flexbox for layout. Are you using Grid at all? Have you thought about using Grid at all?
Yeah. Yeah. We actually have this like early version of a grid control working. So I think that'll be huge. Actually, I think Flexbox and Grid are the two kind of pillars that that define like the new modern CSS layout, and hopefully apps move away from from the legacy flow layout. But I mean, there's no rush.
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions from anyone?
Hey, I have a bit of a general question. Firstly, thank you, Yang. That was very insightful. Seeing as just asked the CSS questions, mine is more general as a company. And based off your app, what's the biggest engineering challenge that you guys are facing right now?
I think the biggest, there's a few. One is, so I mentioned we were working on code components, and we're still working on it. It's a big, very sprawling, complex project to handle third-party arbitrary code components well in the canvas, and so that's one big one. I think another big one is just more about solving end-to-end use cases. So oftentimes when you're creating these design systems or component libraries in Plasmic, the presentation is just one half of the equation, right? You still have to go into code and actually implement the behavior for your, your toggles or your sliders or your, drop downs, and autocompletes are always like super complex components. So that, I guess, is the other big initiative that we're working on, is that is actually providing, at least for a common classes of components, like some of the ones I mentioned, providing out of the box kind of white label component behavior that is actually accessible and has all the best practices and all the stuff baked in, and you're just basically from this design tool wiring up things by naming your elements a certain way or naming your variants a certain way, and those will get reconciled with what the functionality needs. So so in that way, you can kind of quickly create your own autocomplete or whatever kind of control, and yeah, I think that would be a really big step.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Scott? No?
So yeah, I have a couple more. So I think yeah, I think because I'm myself I have a formal background in design, but I've been working as a developer the last decade, so I often find myself at kind of the intersection between kind of design teams and development teams. So this is something that's of like a lot of interest to me.
Awesome.
So, but it's very clear, like seeing that you've kind of borrowed a lot in terms of look and feel from Figma, which isn't a bad thing. Like I think the less learning we need to do when kind of like having interop between tools, the better. Was that something you intentionally did?
So yeah, I mean, we actually try to keep things, I mean, I think at this point things have, I mean, I've been staring at this for so long, so I can't really tell anymore, but we were trying to keep things as similar as possible and familiar as possible to, especially to accommodate, designers and anyone who has experience with other design tools. But at least the Chrome itself, this white theme, we also have a dark theme coming, but this one is, at this point, I think, pretty has diverged from the Figma look. I mean, you can tell me. I feel like, you know, it's we've been really trying to keep the Chrome as simple as possible, but I feel like it's still a little more complex than I would like today, just in terms of like there's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, I mean, I guess it looks a little better if you're selecting one of these guys. But yeah, I think really we're trying to, we work with the designer, Leo, and he's great. I mean, we're working on basically simplifying a lot of the right-hand controls here, so that there's less that's you know, present all the time.
So any intent to add like more kind of data focused tooling, like mock data? One thing, for example, that I played around with a couple of kind of these modern kind of UI design tools. I mostly use Figma. One thing that I really miss that I encountered in Adobe XD is kind of the like ability to just populate like a range of mock data. So for example, say, you know, this is a card component, and like just mocking 20 of them like in a grid, each with like a different title and a different, like, let's say, profile image and whatever, kind of
Right.
like, is that something that you guys are interested in at all, like kind of exploring that side of things a bit as well?
Yeah, great question. It is hard to deny, you know, how helpful that is to be able to design with real data. So it's definitely one we're thinking about. I think this class actually, it kind of falls under the umbrella of like more advanced prototyping. And I do think that that umbrella is actually, you know, one that's very within reach, but also makes a lot of sense. So.
We have a question from Rakesh around React Native. Is that something that you support or something that you would support in the future? Oh,
yeah, so we've gotten that actually quite a bit, React Native. We don't support that today, but it does, you know, it is something that we do hope to support before too long. You know, I think the main, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all React, right? You could say, oh, like, what's the
sure,
you know, reason? But actually, the styling systems in React DOM and React Native Web, or sorry, even just React Native, you know, anything, can be quite different. I guess when I say React Native support, I'm specifically talking about like the official, you know, React Native backends for iOS and Android, and not, you know, VR or, you know, like VF. But yeah, so definitely the styling systems are different. We've been trying actually, as we've been creating Plasmic, to keep Plasmic, the design of like the core representation here, basically future-proof with respect to you know, these other systems where, for instance, you know, one of the things that's very particular about the web, as an example, is like the inheritance model of certain styles, especially typographic styles are the ones that usually are inherited. So yeah, just making sure we're not leaking things like that into the tool.
Right. Thanks. Anyone else?
These are great questions.
Cool.
No
I think
more?
that's it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for
yeah.
yeah. Thank you for having me, and just, you know, for organizing. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for presenting to us. I think we all enjoyed that a lot, and it looks like a really great tool. And hopefully, everyone takes you up on your offer to give it a whirl. So just to confirm that, if we just sign up and then we fill in the survey, and then when you've got a chance, you will
Yeah, right
assign
after
those?
this, I'll just, yeah.
And we must just use this meetup name, yeah? FedSA, right? Is that good?
Yeah.
FedSA. FedSA. Okay, cool. Everyone, you got that? Yes? Okay. So just put that in when you sign up. That's great. Thanks so much. I think we're all going to enjoy having a play around with this and seeing what we can do with it. And maybe you'll get one of your, built with Plasmic projects in production from this meetup.
Yeah.
So just one thing to keep in mind is that obviously we're going to upload a recording of this on YouTube. So you might want to have a bit of a window in terms of accepting people using that.
Yes.
Yeah. I would give it. We usually have the video up within about 2 days, Esco.
Yeah. So let's say 2 days.
So let's say like kill that FedSA thing on Friday.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we'll announce the next meetup shortly on ZA Tech and in the usual places. And Yang, thanks again for giving us your time and demo. It was really great.
Oh, thank you.
Cool.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Take care.